do that now. We'll do the other ones later. Port of Busan, near Warehouse 23. About 40 people were there, lying, standing, running. The fishermen who were up early for work had gathered around when they realized that something big had happened. The reporters who had heard some tips were huddling with them, hoping to catch any newsworthy material that could make a career. But the only two people who knew what had happened had already left the scene. The ambulance was travelling as fast as it could while trying to remain steady. Lieutenant Kang was lying on the seat opposite me. He was still unconscious. The medic said that he was basically asleep and that there was no need to worry. I wasn't surprised. After all, I had intentionally avoided his critical spots earlier. Maybe after the nap he would be even more relaxed. Tired. I felt so tired. First I had knocked out a mob of gangsters, then I had been threatened by Choi Yo-han, and then I still had to fight the lieutenant. I hadn't slept the whole night. Still, I had so many questions in my head that I couldn't rest at all. Why would Lieutenant Kang attack me? And how had he become so strong, like another person completely? What kind of secrets had the lieutenant been hiding? Furthermore, this bald-headed muscular man who was lying between us due to loss of blood, who was he? Considering the situation with the lieutenant, I began to find this big man suspicious too. I quietly took a syringe from a tray near us and hid it, just in case one of them suddenly woke up and tried to stab me with it like a maniac. His veins! The medic mumbled something while trying to give the big man an IV. Suddenly, the ambulance took a sharp left turn and the driver slammed on the brakes to slow down. I heard a few curses from the driver's seat. The ambulance started again and we noticed that the needle had slashed a muscular man, that there was a deep cut in his arm. Strangely though, there was no blood coming out of the cut at all. Transfiguration. After the Cold War ended, there were still plenty of active undercover spies and intelligence agents in both the US and Russia. Transfiguration, at the time, was the main technique adopted by spies to lose someone on their tail. Transfiguration includes more than just changing looks. Changing the color of the outfit, putting sand in the shoes to alter the gait, are all common tricks to help reinforce the disguise and fool a less experienced counterintelligence officer. In 2014, the Russian counterintelligence agency uncovered over 290 foreign spies on Russian soil. However, being exposed did not necessarily mean that one would be arraigned or arrested. Both the Russians and the Americans have similar approaches when dealing with such situations, through the exchanging of captives through diplomatic channels or simply deporting the apprehended agents. I stared at the red operating sign in the ER. I was trying to remember the documentaries about transfiguration that I had seen in the police academy. Transfiguration was a skill that not only could change one's looks, but even one's figure. A transfiguration expert could wear a disguise that was good enough to fool anyone further than 20 centimeters away. This was my first time ever witnessing it at such a close distance. It was so shockingly real. The bodysuit had different thicknesses in different areas. The thicker parts perfectly resembled the texture of bulging muscles. The suit was also completely skin-tight once put on a person, leaving no gaps between the suit and the wearer's skin, preventing people from sensing anything unnatural by contact. It was very difficult to replicate the texture of real skin on the suit though. Most people who wore it to transfigure themselves would be exposed when people touched their skin. However, this female senior officer with a perfect body was brave enough and skilled enough to go undercover in a violent gang, all while pretending to be a shirtless meathead. It simply meant that she must be a master among masters in transfiguration. The people in Unit 4 were practically superheroes. I took out a pack of tissues from my pocket and calmly wiped off the blood coming out of my nose. Not only was this my first time seeing somebody using transfiguration, it was also my first time seeing a naked, gorgeous woman like this. Lieutenant Kang had told me before that Officer Chi-yeon had never attended the police academy, so she was even younger than me. More importantly, she also had a full head of shining, long and straight black hair. She was essentially a goddess from my dreams. From now on, I would be able to spend time with a senior officer like this every day. I, Chung Yeon-min, could die a happy man anytime now. So about that. Someone had just come out of the operating room. It was a young nurse. She ran towards me as I was the only person in the hallway. "Are you a family member of the patient?" I nodded my head, shook it, and nodded again. She has lost too much blood. We need at least 1200 cc more for a transfusion, but we're running out of blood. There haven't been enough donations recently. Our blood bank doesn't have enough blood of her type in storage. We're also having a shortage of another type too. I think it is... Alright, it was type A. What is Officer Chion's blood type? Type O. What was my blood type again? I remembered I had checked before. Let me think. Yes, it was type A. Lieutenant Kang, who had been asleep since we got to the hospital, was suddenly standing behind me. Mine is type B. The nurse looked sympathetic. I'm sorry, but neither of your blood types is a match. I'll have to go and call another hospital. I hope it's not too late. At the beginning of the 20th century, Austrian scientist Karl Landsteiner and Czech serologist Jan Jansky discovered blood type independently by mixing the blood of healthy people externally. They classified blood into 4 types, which are now known as A, B, O, and AB. In the ABO system, the red blood cell in type A and B blood has antigens A and B respectively. The antigens then suppress the natural existence of the corresponding antibodies in their immune system. People with type O blood have neither antigens, which results in the presence of lots of both antibodies A and B. Consequently, people with type O blood cannot accept blood transfusion from other blood types, as the immune system reaction would be too severe and potentially fatal. On the other hand, type O blood can be donated to people with other types of blood, hence the nickname universal donor. A few minutes after she had hurried away, the sign went off. The doctor slowly pushed open the door to the operating room. Everything seemed to be moving in slow motion, and the door looked like it was as heavy as a mountain. I'm so sorry. I held my hand in my hands, staring at the floor. I couldn't breathe. It was all because of my little trick. If I hadn't shot her, if only I were a better police officer, she would still be alive. Chang Yonmin. Yep. Oh, that's quite a bit. Okay, yeah, that is reasonable. Wait, okay. Lieutenant Kang is O. Yeah, that should work out fine, whatever way it goes. So just out of curiosity, I might have to look this up later. If you've got a patient with, say, blood type A, as we've got here, and you've got 2 possible donations in blood type A and blood type O, which of blood types would you give? Would you give blood type A because it matches, or would you give blood type O because you can just give blood type O to everyone? Or would you keep blood type O back because someone else might need it who doesn't have a blood type that matches? I think it's probably the last one. Great, both of your blood types are a match. We'll take 400... I still don't know what CC is supposed to be. From each of you, plus the last 400 of type O blood in our storage, and it should be enough. I'll draw blood from you both immediately. She gently pushed a needle into my arm. I watched as my blood slowly filled the bag, thinking about how it was going to save her life. You've been in my unit for a while now. I never had the chance to tell you something. Lieutenant Kang, who had his blood drawn earlier, leaned on the long bench next to me and spoke to me. Considering what I had accomplished today, was he going to reward me with something? No. To tell me something. Could it be... You're very good? You're the best new recruit I've ever seen? Unit 4 is so lucky to have you. None of the above. I just couldn't stop my imagination. He took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. But then he must have realized that he couldn't smoke here, so he took it out and put it back into the pack. Never be late again. If you are, I'll have you transferred. Yeah. That sounds more logical. That sounds like something he'd say. Alright. We've got one more. So far, yet so close, and pills. The simulation exam was only hours away, yet I had been lying in bed all night, unable to fall asleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the sketch that Mr. Wen had drawn of me earlier. It was so beautiful. I thought I should go to school earlier to try and find it in a trash can. I got out of bed, walked across the living room and grabbed the box of chocolate milk that Rocky had paid me. The moon seemed especially round tonight. I leaned on the railing of the balcony, watching the moon, drinking the milk. Mr. Wen's place was to my right. The light was still on. Ever since I'd learned that Mr. Wen lived next door, I would often involuntarily wander onto the balcony to watch the view outside. However, I'd never seen him out here, even once. The curtain was always closed behind the glass door to Mr. Wen's living room. I couldn't see anything inside except to tell whether the lights were on or not. It was almost 1 a.m. The lights were still on. I didn't think that he could be up so late, despite his lights usually still being on when I had gone to bed in the past. What was he doing at this hour? It couldn't be because of what happened earlier today. It had been only a joke. I suppose that I should go and apologize tomorrow. I suddenly heard a muffled sound. Then I noticed that his curtain moved slightly and saw a hand appear at the bottom of the glass door. It was Mr. Wen's hand. Murder? Shut up, what was I thinking? I immediately called for an ambulance while I knocked on his door, but nobody responded. No one answered the phone in the manager's office either. I heard that people could pass out for many reasons, but the best opportunity for first aid only lasted for the first 5 minutes. It might be too late to wait for the ambulance to arrive. I grabbed the rope on the balcony and tied one end around my wrist. I tied the other end to the railing. Finally, I climbed up the railing and stood on top of it, shaking. Mr. Wen's balcony was approximately 1.5 meters away. Oh, that's no distance whatsoever. My own record in long jumping was 1.72 meters. That's so short. I don't know, what's mine? I think mine's about 4 meters 60 or something when it was back in school. But I mean, that's with a run-up, which you probably don't have with a balcony. But standing long jump, I don't know, probably, yeah, that's fair to be honest. I'd have to test it out later. Standing long jump, I'd assume about 2 meters, a bit further maybe. I should be alright then. 1, 2, 3, jump! The slipper had been tossed on the ground earlier. Damn it, I was so close to reaching the pipe on the other side. I was hanging between the 3rd and 4th floors. The rope tightened around my waist. Thankfully it was strong enough to hold me. I could still make it. I held onto the rope for dear life, carefully untied the knot and jumped onto the balcony on the 3rd floor. However, nobody seemed to be home. It took 20 minutes for the paramedics to get me off of the 3rd floor balcony. By then, it was already too late for Mr. Wen. I watched helplessly as they carried him onto the ambulance. He looked like he was only taking a nap. I suddenly had a feeling of déjà vu of the day I lost my father. No. Lee Wen. Pills. If someone asked me what I wanted the most at that exact moment, I would say freedom. As for the thing that I wanted second most, I would say death. 2 months ago, a short and skinny old man had bought me from a human trafficking auction house and brought me back to his mansion. At first I thought he was just like most of the other buyers who had only been looking for some exotic playthings, but I soon found out that he was much more frightening. His name was Money Jia, an infamous local millionaire in Hong Kong. On the surface, he was the owner of a chemical plant, making his bucks from pharmaceutical research and development. But behind the scenes, he had been conducting drug tests on humans. And the tests were not just limited to medicinal drugs, but also experimental ones that were developed solely for the gangs, some of which were even from abroad. What he had spent in buying us was nothing compared to the profits he could make off of us. All of his test subjects were people he had purchased from the auction house. None of us had any legal status. Therefore, nobody would care who we were or where we had gone. It was like we had evaporated from the face of the earth. There were both men and women among us. Sometimes the women might get a little lucky compared to the men. If the girls were willing to become a concubine, they could be spared the fate of trying the more dangerous drugs. Rose had been one of the concubines. She had still died though. I heard she had OD'd. After her death, her body was taken away like everyone else before her. She just disappeared without a trace. I would rather die from poison than become another Rose. The people who had made the same choice as I were locked inside the dungeon. I mean, isn't ODing technically dying from poison? I'd say that counts. They had tied our hands and feet to the bedposts with our limbs spread out unnaturally. Everyone had been tied down in a separate room. However, the air ducts in the rooms were all connected. The air was filled with the smell of rotten flesh and death. Every few minutes I could hear horrifying screams coming from the distance. I'd endured a fever for the last couple of days. I heard them saying that the drug they had been giving me was defective, and if my fever didn't come down soon I would die. To make sure that they could extract as much profit out of me as they could, they had assigned a new doctor. He had been checking up on me every day. This doctor seemed more bookish. He might be a good man. In my haze I tried to talk to him. He never responded, so I kept talking to myself. After setting up my IV drip, the doctor hung the bottle of medicine on a makeshift pole that had been made out of a rusty water pipe. Then his phone rang. He walked to the hallway outside and half closed the door. His medicine kit was near my pillow. There were 2 bottles in the corner of the kit. One of sleeping pills, one of poison. The doctor was still answering the phone outside. The day had finally come. If I could just grab that bottle, I could carry out the plan I'd had in my mind for a long time. The rope was loose. I grabbed the pipe firmly. I wiggled my left hand out of the loosened rope and reached for the kit. I grabbed the bottle closer to my left hand, the sleeping pills. I twisted the cap off with my left hand and poured the entire bottle into my mouth. It was so painful. Then I lifted the pipe and smashed it down on my own head. I could finally end this life in hell. Carlos, I'm sorry. Your Alicia can't take care of you anymore. Goodbye forever, Carlos. I didn't know how long had passed. I was so surprised when I woke up. I had an oxygen mask on my face and IV tubes inserted into my arms. Some familiar guards and doctors were standing next to the bed. They had tied my hands and feet to the bedposts. The air was still filled with that rotten smell. I closed my eyes in desperation. Heavenly Father, what have I done wrong? Alicia. Alright. That's quite a few. So these come before. Okay. So it doesn't really... Okay, that depends on which one I pick, because she picks the left one, yeah. Or the one that's closer to her. Like this? Let's see. I tried to reach for the kit, but the rope on my left hand was too tight. Whenever I had gotten a chance to be alone, I would try to wriggle my wrist to loosen up the rope a little. They must have noticed that it had gotten loose after my seizure yesterday. They had tied it up again. Damn it, I hadn't expected the opportunity to present itself so soon, and I was not prepared. I was such a failure. The doctor came back from his phone call. I was still lying on the bed all spread out with my eyes closed, mumbling quietly to myself, just as he had left me. He felt my forehead with his hand, fiddled with the IV a bit, closed his kit and left. I opened my eyes when I heard the door close, and I wept. The wind was strong that night. I held onto the pipe and climbed up to Mr. Wen's balcony. Mr. Wen had fallen to the ground in his living room. I could barely feel his pulse and he wasn't breathing. I immediately ran through everything I had learned about CPR in my head. I put both of my hands together, placed them upon his chest and began pressing. Okay, good. 1, 2, 3. I used as much strength as I could with every press. Also good. I just hoped that I wasn't too weak to save his life. After 30 presses, Mr. Wen showed no sign of waking up, and he was still not breathing. I lifted his chin up and started doing mouth-to-mouth to him. Okay, that's all according to protocol so far. Very good. 2 sets of mouth-to-mouth followed by 30 presses on his chest. I kept repeating this routine. Very good, Li Wen. Wait, I just noticed they have the same surname. How did I not notice that before? Mr. Wen's forehead was covered in tiny drops of sweat. His wet hair was stuck to the corners of his eyes. That sounds like a heart attack. if I had to guess. Why won't you wake up? Time kept passing. It had been way over 5 minutes, but I wouldn't stop. Hope was like a flickering light on a single candle. I couldn't tell when it would suddenly go out. My tears and sweat were mixing together and falling on Mr. Wen's shirt, drop after drop, making it wet. A rough hand grabbed my wrist. Mr. Wen's eyes slowly opened. I didn't know why I cried. I must have looked horrible with my ugly crying face. A few minutes later, the paramedics finally arrived. They asked what kind of first aid I had given him. I suddenly realized what I had just done, and I couldn't get a word out. I just did that with Mr. Wen without mouths, didn't I? The ambulance had taken Mr. Wen away. The paramedics told me to bring some necessities for his hospital stay. I finally calmed down, and for the first time I had the chance to look around Mr. Wen's apartment. There were all sorts of paintings hanging on the walls. A small seaside town glowing in the sunset. A golden wheat field stretching endlessly. A rainbow crossing a valley through rosy clouds after the rain. They were all masterpieces. Weirdly though, according to the signatures, most of them were from over 10 years ago. A portrait of a woman attracted my attention. The woman seemed to be in her early 20s, her long black hair spread out on a soft white pillow. Her sleeping face looked mesmerizing, even to me. Was she Mr. Wen's wife? I remembered when Rocky had asked whether Mr. Wen had a girlfriend on his first day. He hadn't answered the question. But why was he living alone then? Right, I should be collecting necessities for Mr. Wen. Speaking of which, what did one need for a hospital stay anyway? Pajamas, underwear, toothbrush, toothpaste, towel, slippers, razor, face wash, napkins? I scoured the kitchen and the bathroom thoroughly. The only door left had to be the door to the bedroom. I should be able to find a change of clothes in it. I pushed the door open. To my surprise, what was behind the door looked exactly like what had often appeared in my dreams. It was a graveyard of paintings, torn apart, painted over, pieces so small that they were completely unrecognizable. The remains of various paintings nearly completely filled the room. In a corner of the room, some blankets lay on the floor with some clothes folded on top of them. Was this where Mr. Wen usually spent the night? The room made me feel nothing but sadness and utter despair. They were so much alike, Mr. Wen and he. Mr. Wen and who? Well, that's an S, that's an A. I guess? I mean, this didn't have any effect on this story, I think. So let's try this. I wiggled my left hand out of the loosened rope and reached for the kit. Yep. It was almost the size of half of my palm. I needed to hide it somewhere. The doctor came back from his phone call. I was still lying on the bed, all spread out with my eyes closed. But when he checked my forehead, I winced. Seeing my strange reaction, he carefully examined his medicine kit again and noticed a missing bottle. There was no other furniture in the room except the bed that I was lying in. Soon, he found the bottle under my pillow. Once he had the bottle back, he didn't seem to be interested in giving me a hard time for it. It was as if nothing had happened. My life in hell continued. Okay, it got worse. I mean, I can change these two up, but shouldn't change anything, yeah. What if I bring that back and leave it like this? Okay, that's still an A. Oops, no, don't show me hints just yet. Okay, yeah, didn't see the X. Would that ruin it? This one? No, it doesn't ruin it. So like this? Possibly. I would have thought that she would just slip and fall off the balcony if she hadn't taken off her slippers beforehand. I wiggled my left hand out of the loosened rope and reached for the kits. Oh, that might not have been the best idea. I grabbed the bottle closer to my left hand, the poison. It was almost the size of half of my palm. Yeah. Needed to hide it somewhere. Saw the slipper that I dropped yesterday when I was having a seizure. It was close enough for me to reach it. The doctor came back from his phone call. I was still lying on the bed all spread out and with my eyes closed, mumbling quietly to myself, just as he had left me. Yeah, the bottle of poison was still safely hidden inside the slipper. I know that as long as I do my best, my dream will come true. Okay. And we've got some new post, but we'll be reading through it next time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys then. Bye.